So I wouldn't say this is necessarily my favorite thing that I took away from the book, but it's definitely the most egregious thing that happened with the whole fear of going out and being vocal and all that sorts of stuff. And quite ironically, I'm also kind of covering a similar topic in my writing and argument class, and um, I kind of went into a bit more detail there. The whole notion of black people kind of taught to their kids before the civil rights movement really started, like, don't step out of line, don't do anything stupid, don't do anything vocal because it's going to come back around on us. Um, because by this point, uh, the the culture, especially in the South, had largely remained unchanged as much as it could be, if that makes sense. Because yeah, there was no more slavery, there was no more, you can't treat blacks like they're pieces of trash in terms of you can't put them into slave labor, but they made them slave like. And the white people sort of continued to perpetuate this idea that they were the masters, the black people, and if they stepped out of line, they're going to get punished, and bad things are going to happen to them. So largely, it hadn't changed in that sense. Um, and I think the black people were complicit in it, not just because they could have gotten hurt, but I kind of did a little bit of insight into this in one of my responses in a discussion in my writing class, and it was um, when people choose if they're going to fight for something that is perceived to be, or fight against something that's perceived to be unjust, or continue to live in a situation that provides them stability and security, people are going to go to most people, not all, but most people are going to go to the one where the safety and security are ensured, even if that's overall a lesser situation than the fighting against an unjust thing, because that's sort of the worst patch. Why go for something worse, even if it's short term, if I can just stay and I've got my safety, I've got my security, I've got my life here. I don't need anything to change about it because I'm safe. Um, and I think both of those things, both in terms of the culture hadn't changed that much, and the blacks on their side didn't want to open themselves up to more punishment. Was sort of the big thing that kind of built in on itself and created these decades long um, notion of just we've got to stay here, otherwise we're going to get hurt really badly. Not to mention all the race riots that had gone down at this point in time, back to previous content, like for example the Tulsa or the Omaha race riots, because their previous attempts had not turned out so well, and it resulted in a lot of bloodshed and a lot of death, and those kinds of things just kind of said, all right, we're going to take a step back. We're not going to try and force the issue any more than we need to, as long as we can continue to have a stable and structured society, even if that meant to a degree segregation, which is heartbreaking. And we can continue to see it today because we still have issues. There's people that still have unstable. There's still unstable situations, and there's still people who don't want to do anything about it because their situation is stable. Um, so there's definitely a lot of uh, push and pull factors here, and I think it's a debate, not just for blacks, but a society as a whole that I think would be a really interesting one to engage in. But it's definitely evident in the black community and their history. Um, so I did think that was a really not wasn't my favorite, but an interesting part that both you and the book discussed.